So we succeed together as this group versus I succeed by forcing you to do my bidding. And a skillful leader influences by stimulating others, by spurring them on, by setting them up to be successful. She did a whole bunch of research that started to develop and identify this group versus the individual. What are implications of this approach?
You bring out more productivity or just teamwork.
Yeah, I don't know if you bring out in the short run more productivity, but you bring out more sustainable productivity.
Well, you're stimulating though.
Because you're constantly stimulating your thinking. Yeah, what other implications?
I think without any kind of individual recognition, though, that even though it's great that everybody is being recognized as a group, you also don't have the individual recognition, which people like that. know,
So you
people
lose
like-
some of the
yeah,
individual.
You like to be recognized in front of people.
Sure.
It makes you feel good, and if we're gonna do what makes them feel good, that's nice, unfortunately.
Yep. Yeah, we have this view that the nice thing to say is that things in teams, right? So teams have become a big word the last 20 years. And team is great. But team is not the only approach, and it's not always the best approach. It depends on the situation, the setting, the scenario, the environment, the players. Team is great a lot of times. Individual is also great a lot of times. Neither are great at all times.
This is going to produce more loyalty and
Potentially more loyalty.
also there's less discarding. You're not,
Hopefully less discarding. What they found out of this is that the group self-manages more than the manager, and the group will, through positive peer pressure, bring up or discard, versus the company just throwing away. That's the ideal scenario, by the way. It doesn't happen often. You get the self-managing team that takes care of policing itself. That's what they talk about with champion sports teams. They talk about the locker room that, you know, will take care of it. That's self-managing team. That's kind of like the ideal. It doesn't always get there in corporate. There's many other competing agendas and things, but.
As you mentioned, 1920s, like Durango, who obviously heavy, our economy was totally based on manufacturing. Almost sounds like union right there. Power with instead of power over. The company had power over employees. The unions had power with employees. Create a community, your union. Anyway.
That's back when we needed unions.
Yes, I agree.
Unions were perfect up until about the 70s, 80s. And then the legal environments. Basically, unions were necessary because the legal environment wasn't conducive for the worker. Now the legal environment's overly conducive for the worker, that unions are actually hurting themselves and companies. But through the 50s, 60s, 40s, 30s, without unions, we wouldn't have some of the safety, security, and legal environment things that we need that we have today. So they served a great purpose. They tend to serve less purpose now. Because they've become about power and money. Just, by the way, have you seen the size of the corporate headquarters in DC of like the UAW? It is huge. I forget, it's $100 and some $billion building, something like that. It's massive.
I think we don't pick up numbers.
Not very often. Not very often. But that doesn't mean union was bad. It means those union leaders got greedy, which happens to lots of people who now have access to resources and power and such. So there's some things that came out of that, power with versus power over, accomplish things together. Group identity became one versus individual identity, so I can identify with as a part of the group. Not in here, but well, it might be in one of my slides, but people, even the person who says, I want to be a loner, I want to be different, but have you ever noticed like it's not as big anymore, but like goth individuals, you know how they all look just like other goth individuals?
That's interesting.
I want to be against the society with a group of people like me that want to be against the society. Humans, by the fact that we're created in God's image, have a need to belong to something. This recognized that. Taylor's did not recognize this need for belonging. This recognizes that we have an innate sense to belong to something. Mayo's Hawthorne effect. I'm going to go into the whole Hawthorne studies, but found out work is a social system, and that management is only one factor affecting behavior, but also that environment matters. What are the implications for this?
Culture.
Everything in the environment. Culture, cleanliness, structure. Anyone spend any time in manufacturing? So, I end up in I love manufacturing. I like metal bending in particular. That's what I describe most of the manufacturing in northern Indiana. I describe as metal bending. Because we're shaping something for automotive or something like that. Bending metal. It's much more high tech than that, but I just like to call it metal bending. And the reason I like it is because I can see something done, and when you make a change, you can more readily see the impact of it. When I work in like financial services or knowledge working in office stuff, and we say, hey, let's try this. Well, how'd it work? Well, everyone seems better, but you can't see. I mean, yeah, stuff gets done, but you can't. Metal bending, you get to see things get done differently. And so that is just a lot of fun. And it's probably personally fun for me because I'm not mechanically inclined, and so it's kind of cool to see the machinery doing stuff that I never knew it could do. And just because I can't envision those things, I'm not all that mechanically inclined. But one of the things that we've learned collectively, and I see play out in a lot of different companies just in this area, is clean manufacturing facilities. The workers are a little more energetic. They're a little more happier to be there. It's not always based off pay and all that. The environment, how bright, how well lit. Am I in a uniform or not? And there's pros and cons on both that, so it's not, but what is the environment, not just what is the work? And the cleanliness of shops makes a big difference on how people view their job. I remember working with a student one time doing his undergrad, came back to me, he worked for a large printer, and his sole goal was, he was making good money. He was actually making more than me, and he was my student, which happens all the time in the MBA. It doesn't happen as often in the undergrad. I said, why are you looking to leave? I mean, you're making really good money. He goes, I want to go home at the end of the day and not take an hour and a half with a lava soap to clean my hands. That was his whole career goal. He was tired of cleaning his hands for an hour and a half every day at the end of his work. That was affecting his view of himself, his job, his work. He was making really good money and very valued at his printing company. But now what I sense later of us is, why don't you wear gloves?
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe there's a reason he couldn't. Maybe there's some touch feel to what he did, I don't know. But nonetheless, that was impacting his view on the job. Now, I'm wondering if the owner of that company knew that, and this guy was very skilled, very valuable, if he would have said, I gotta figure out, because I don't want to lose this guy. How do I change this? But environment matters. All right, other implications to this approach.
using the approach, then if you know that the environment matters, then you can change that and affect your staff, to make it better for them.
Yes.
That's depending upon maybe where you're placing your business when you're starting up, because if you want a certain type of worker, you want to place your business where there is the population of workers, you know, they might not want to move somewhere that is.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you go get the certain type of worker and mentality, you know, if I want highly creative, innovative thinking, Fort Wayne's probably not. But if I want conservative, process-oriented thinking, the Germanic Lutheran background of Fort Wayne with some of the history of the kinds of, there's great skilled labor force in Fort Wayne. But I'm picking it based on a different type of company. I'm also convinced that's one of the reasons why we have a large, besides the way the country's shaped and roads, but a large population of like distribution companies, warehousing in the area. It kind of fits with the workforce. That's why Silicon Valley too. Hey, let's try it, let's be creative, let's take the risk. I was just surfing the other day with no money, so now I'm a millionaire, but if I have no money tomorrow, that's okay because that's how I started. That's not the environment of Fort Wayne. Not quite the way it works in the Valley either, but that culture and mindset's there. So you're right, the broader location matters. Other implications, thoughts?
Well, another thing going along with the line of that is the hiring process and what maybe tools you use to pick
Yeah.
the workers to create the, you know.
If environment matters, I need to hire for people to fit the environment and not be opposite the environment. That's one thing that Steve's company does very well. Maybe even to a fault at times. But they hire a very specific culture fit. And it works. Doesn't mean they get it right 100% of the time, but seem to get it right more often than not as far as a culture fit. Yeah.
You get to the point where you actually attract that type of person anyway.
Because that's where they fit.
Because I already know, our cultures already know. So.
Yeah. All right, Drucker, I have to throw a Drucker slide in the management class. By the way, if you don't know who Peter Drucker is, before you read Patrick Lencioni, go read a little bit about Peter Drucker. When you're done your MBA and you get to pick what you read versus constantly being bombarded with what you're told to read. Get a book. I used to use it in this class. I don't anymore. I wish I did. I should go back to that. I get to control it, so I don't know why I say I wish I did, because it's only my fault. It's a book called The Essential Drucker. It's a collection of 27 of his best pieces of work. It's book chapters, articles, things like that. Don't look at the date of any of them, but when they were written. Because you'll say, oh, it's not practical. This guy's work is timeless. He is the father of modern management, brilliant, usually has a unique perspective. In The Essential Drucker, he's got a book on entrepreneurship and innovation that you would thought was written yesterday and was like published in Forbes magazine, 1957. He was that forward thinking. His work's timeless. But one of the things that he had was management by objectives. So you set objectives, you organize around that, you motivate and communicate, establish measurements of performance, and you develop people to meet the objectives. That was the 5 points of management by objectives. And basically said the best way to predict the future is to create it. So you create the future by setting these objectives and putting people in position to meet the objectives. He also said a manager is responsible for the application and performance of knowledge. That's the manager's job. He also gave my favorite definition, which is he defined the purpose of a business. And I thought this makes the most sense. What do you think he said the purpose of the business is? The purpose of a business is to What would you define the purpose of a business as? Shareholder value? No, not shareholder value. Profit? No, he didn't say profit either. Develop people. He didn't say that. I wish he would have. That would have made it even cooler. But he believed that was necessary to do it.
What about meeting the needs of, or satisfying them for any need?
Very close. Not just satisfying unmet need. He said the purpose of any business, for-profit, non-profit, is to create a customer. Profit is just a measure of how successful you're creating and keeping customers. If you take the nonprofit, and I've seen it a few nonprofits, they have this great mission heart, and the people that they're trying to target actually want their service. They aren't actually creating or they've designed it in such a way they can't access the service. Doesn't matter how good it is if they can't access it. So for-profit, non-profit, he would say the purpose of business is to create a customer. Things like shareholder value, profit, all those are just measures of how successfully we're creating and keeping customers. So profit isn't the goal, it's a measure of how well we're meeting our goals. And his belief is that if you would focus on that, the other measures would fall in place. But when you focus on profit, back to your accounting class, you get tied up in things at the end of every quarter. One of the exercises they like to do with accountants is, we aren't going to sell anymore. We aren't going to materially change anything. We have 2 days till we close the books. Go find me a penny per share. And so, how do accountants find one more penny per share in earnings? Accountants? Delve into the numbers. Can I pull in forward some depreciation, back it off? I'm not making material changes to the business. I'm making entries to change what the earnings per share can be reported as. I might do an asset sale. I might shift off some things. I might restructure some short-term debt into long-term debt or vice versa. You know, I'm making accounting metric. Nothing illegal. Usually not unethical. But I'm not making any material changes to the business. I'm just structuring things. He's saying all that is unproductive work because it's not doing anything to create and keep customers. And that if you'd spent your time focusing on the other, these things would have taken care of themselves anyway. Implications of this approach, thought process. Do you see this play out in any of the places you work?
Steve Jobs sort of did this except for developing people because he was sort of known for niche people. But I mean, create a customer, that was his number one focus. He paved that way and he said, this is what you want, and he told people that and they bought it.
Yeah, just you go make it. We will not settle for anything but the best.
See pieces of the five played out over the last 15 years of Sims. We've always had MBOs. We've always had goals. But going back to other classes, it always feels like everyone's working for this month's number. And you forget about the long-term process or implications. So I think some of those things we see all the time. Other ones I'm not sure I do, but maybe I should look more closely for them. Maybe they're going on in the background, I just don't realize because I'm so busy.
Go back to where I was at yesterday with the things. There's companies, not on camera, but yours being one of them, who years ago did MBOs. And they'll set the objectives for the person, and all the objectives really are is we want to have this much profit, so let's make up some objectives that get us there. They'll assign them, and then they'll follow up quarterly or every 6 months or once a year. How'd you meet your objectives? And they say we're managing by objectives. They forget established measures of performance. These are things of how do I know that I'm on the way to meeting those objectives so that I can course correct before the end of the time period. You know, what are those things? How do I develop people? How do I motivate people? They forget that management by objectives only works with all the other things. Do they have the resources? Are they equipped? Can I remove obstacles? What is in the way of them meeting those objectives? All of that goes with MBO being a good thing. What too many people focused on was, got to set objectives. Go. Well, I set objectives, so therefore I've done good management. How come you can't meet them? They forget. And this is one of the things, back to my earlier discussion on theory, that gives academic theory a bad name. It's bad managers that misapply theory and then blame it on, well, see, I told you that none of the academic stuff works. Because they only take parts of it. And they don't take the right parts. I think it's okay to just take parts and apply. You have to take the right parts and understand what you're taking and not taking. All right, now I hate Maslow, but just because I don't hate him personally, I don't know him. I hate his hierarchy of needs. Oh, I can hate him since he's dead. You can't murder an already dead person, right? And Jesus in Matthew was talking about that if you hate another, you've already murdered them. So I can't murder someone already dead, so I guess I can hate them.
Perfect connection.
I'm pretty sure I should not have said any of that on video right now.
At the end, justifies the means to me.
That's right. No, but I throw it in here simply because it's a management class and Maslow's in every management textbook and I didn't give you a textbook. So if you're familiar with Maslow, he says, look, you've got to meet people's biological and physical needs before they care about their safety needs. Once you meet their safety needs, then they care about belongingness. Once they belong, then they care about self-esteem. Once they're self-esteem, they can move towards self-actualization. But he would say you don't move from one to the other. Now, if you think about this in just basic human, okay, look, if I don't have basics of food, I don't really care about law, order, those things, because I'm hungry. Once I'm fed and warm, now I care about law, order, structure, safety. Once I have that met, now I actually care about being a part of a group and belonging. Once that, now I care about self-esteem. Once I have those, now I'm really worried about personal growth. So this has gotten applied in a lot of management books as an approach to structuring and managing things. What are some implications of this? And with that, I'll say, why do you think that I don't care for Maslow? Sounds all nice, right?
I'm not sure about the hierarchy. You guys have to think about that a little bit, because, I don't know.
What he basically say is, you don't care how many friends you have if you're dying of starvation.
Right.
But once you're fed and have some, protection around you, now you care about belonging and the group and things like that. What's the focus in the pyramid of identity?
The focus is you, it's an individual. But
Yeah, and that's actually my number one problem. So, as a believing Christian, where should my identity rest? What I say. In the person of Jesus Christ and the hope that I have in Him. And so I would say that as a believer, well, even as an unbeliever, that at the end of the day, when we die, there's two places that we have an opportunity to go. Christ has made a path for one. One's a relationship with us. The other path outside of Him has a different path of destruction. That I would rather die physically and live eternally, that as my baseline need, But my ultimate goal isn't for my self-fulfillment, it's for the fulfilling the call of Christ. So I think he takes that entire equation, and this is a very humanistic approach. Now, if you wrap all that around it, then maybe we can start to find some value in here. But he meant this is a very humanistic model. So that's one of the reasons I don't like it. So I'm not a humanist. There's too much proof in the world that the broader condition of humankind is not serving its own best interests. Other implications, though, if any?
I think that from a manager's perspective, they can misuse this model so that they think that they're giving you know, a decent salary, like let's put that at the very bottom, but they don't need to worry about if you're happy in your job or not. They don't care about that.
I do see there are some orders here that people will say, how come no one's engaged? How come, let's focus on giving people greater responsibility, but they don't feel like they have any job security. These things don't work from a management perspective. If people feel like your head's not on video, so you don't have to talk, but your organization is shifting a lot of work away from your current office. I could do these things all day long in that area. I could come in as a management consultant and say, oh, you know what, we got to get the team together, we got people feel a greater sense of responsibility, all those things. And they know that come sometime this spring, they aren't going to have a job anyway. That'd be a total waste of time, effort, and money because the basic safety needs of job security are not met. So sometimes that implicates depending on the industry. So if you're in an industry that's really struggling at a certain point in time, as a manager, I had to spend my time talking about why are we different, how do things function, what are we going to do to create the security, before I worry about these things. So if I see any value in this, I pick as a manager what I focus on, given the scenario that my group, my company is in.
I think it's a good model for management as far as, because you can use biological, physiology, whatever, on tape, yay. But as resources, or have you given the employees the resources in which to do their job? Then are you giving them job security? Then within their groups of work, do they feel accepted? Then from there they can gain self-esteem, and then they can become the best employee that they can. Would be self-actualization, and then also teach other employees how to get at that.
Well, that's the other piece I don't like, is it doesn't here, what's the give back model? So, yeah, that should be the next approach. All right, this is a reality, Adam's equity theory, job motivation. One we don't like to believe exists. All of you operate under this as well, but inputs, what I put into my job, time, effort, ability, loyalty, tolerance, flexibility, integrity, so on and so forth. Outputs, what I get from my job, pay, bonus, perks, benefits, development, reputation, praise, responsibility. What Adam's equity theory suggests is that people will balance the scales. I will put in all sorts of things as long as I feel the outputs that I get balance. And if the scales get too far out of whack, we will correct the scales. Fairness is based on perceived market norms. What are the implications of this view?
It's very self-serving.
It's self-serving. What's the definition of an organization? I used last night. Is it a group of people that come together to achieve a common good? No. It's a group of people that come together in the belief that achieving some common good will help them achieve their own individual wants and needs. Drew only cares about the success of Boston Scientific to the point that it implicates his personal scenario in a way that he's trying to achieve. And we're each in the same. I do care about Taylor University. I want it to be successful. I'm not going to do that for free. I don't care about it to the point that I will, sacrifice beyond a certain amount for it. Doesn't mean that I'm not a team player. But we all have so we're all part of multiple organizations. My family's an organization. It has needs, all those things that we balance against. So Adams equity theory is taking in to this. It's not necessarily that, now, are there people who have unrealistic expectations? Sure. What do I do? What does this mean from a management perspective? Anyone ever worked with somebody that you looked at and you're just like, you're lazy? Anyone ever worked with a lazy person that you're just convinced lazy? What did you attribute their laziness to? Typically. Some personal judgment on them and their work ethic, right? One of the things as a manager, especially coming into a situation, so take the group that I worked yesterday, is we assume when they aren't reliable, they aren't showing full commitment and all that, that it's some individual characteristic of who they are. As a manager, one of the things I first ought to take a look at is, what has been the history on this side as it equates to? Had they been a good employee at one point in time? If they had, what changed? What's different? Now, if as I look through that, I say, you know what, this company's been nothing but fantastic to this person, okay, now I've got an individual deal to work with. But I like to start looking here, assume there's some reason that's caused them to be less than what we would like. As I start eliminating all those other factors, I can zero in on, okay, it's them and I can work with that. But I may find out, you know what, it's not them, it's these things, and I can address it. But I like to start with, it's not that everyone's innocent until proven guilty, exactly, but that kind of approach. I like to start with, let's assume the best about the employee. I may find out that, you know what, they're just not the best employee, and that's, we'll deal with that. But I like to rule out the fact that it's company or other people's fault first. And so Adams equity theory gives me some things to look at. What's changed. There was a year at the institution where different things, budget tight, enrollment issue, things like that. They were really enrollment issues, but they said to the broader faculty, not going to do any pay raise this year unless we hit X headcount. Come to September of that year, X headcount was hit. Great, where's our pay raises? Oh, there's no pay raises. What do you mean, we hit the X headcount? Well, but it cost us more money to get the X headcount because we did more discounting. Oh, wait a minute. What was said was if we hit X headcount. What was not said was what you had to do to help us hit X headcount. So faculty had spent time on the phones in the evenings calling prospective students, serving as, admissions people. Going out of their way, blood, sweat, not really tears, but lots of extra work above and beyond to help hit this number. Really rally together, let's do, and then felt slapped in the face. Now, I understood accounting-wise the mechanism of discounting internal scholarships. To say, they said head count because they didn't think people would understand the numbers. They wouldn't know how to hit this dollar amount. They knew how to identify people. I get the fact that when you hit it by one, but it costs you X more in discounting, that it's not the same. I understood that. but it's not what was said. And so how it was interpreted by the broader faculty was, they're all about theirs, I better be all about mine. That wasn't what was meant to be communicated, but that's how it was received. That changes how people then work, and it took a little time to overcome that. What I said to the CFO was, look, I get that you don't have the resources to do the 2.5% raise you wanted to do. If I'm you, I throw a bone of $100 an employee or something like that to say, you're right, we just barely hit it, so we can't do everything we want, but here's something. They didn't agree with me, but I think, that's what I would have done. But employees in their mind wrote a give and take. I gave this at my own expense, and I got, then they took it. Employees weren't 100% right. University wasn't 100% right. It was, one of those scenarios. But this is how people's minds work. As a manager, I need to consider that and how I manage. All right, you've heard theory X, theory Y before, McGregor. Theory X says employees require tight control or they will not perform. Must keep my thumb on them. Employees will always do it wrong. Employees are bad. Theory Y says employees have latent creativity just waiting to be tapped. Lots of people I work with, I do some work with a company, and I had them do a theory X, theory Y survey, and they were all theory Y. Different as I already knew how they managed. It's like, so you all want to be theory Y. And theory Y is the ideal. Lift up, liberate, resource, all those kind of things. But their behaviors oftentimes betray them as theory X. I want processes, I need multiple approval signatures, Taylor has a theory X approach in a lot of areas. Small conservative, want to make sure that people are doing this. So we have this credit card process. So I use the university credit card every month. We've got this little online thing, password protected to me and my credit card. I'm the only one who can get there. Where I have to go in and log my receipts and it automatically uploads. I'm the only one that's password protected who can validate and approve my credit card expenses. But I then have to print off a screenshot, staple it to my receipts. Now they need the receipts for auditing. So I staple it to the screenshot, that's how they know, that makes sense. But I asked, why do I have to then sign my name? Well, so that we know that you saw this. It's password protected. I'm the only one. If I didn't, and you came to me and said, hey, why did you okay this? Am I going to say, well, I didn't sign? Well, you might. Really? It's password protected. I'm the only one. Because I constantly forget. I print it off, staple it, send it. They'll forward it back. Hey, we can't pay your credit card thing until you signed an okay to pay this. I'm like, I'm the only one who could have input it. It's clearly me. Well, we have lots of those extra processes in that take time. And that one's, really minor, and but lots of companies have those things. That's a theory X form of management. Now, certain controls you need in place. If I'm signing off a $5,000 check, yeah, you probably want multiple controls in place. That's proper accounting and management. But oftentimes we have things that are very theory X, even though we want to be theory Y. We don't always trust people. We want to be trusted. We don't always want to trust people. All right. I'm rushing through now because I'm about 1 minute. Herzberg's very popular. I like Herzberg a lot. He says there's motivators and there's hygiene factors. Hygiene factors are status, security, salary, even bonus. He says is a hygiene factor. And you know how bonuses work. You get used to a certain percentage of your income as bonus every year. When you don't have it, you're now mad. Doesn't matter that you may not even hit your numbers, you're now mad because it was actually expected income. All bonus is expected income that you don't find out until the end of the year if you got what was expected or not. one of the reasons I advocate for changing the bonus plan every single year. I don't like a set structure. I also don't like bonus plans that are percentage of salary opportunity. All that's saying is, yeah, I really have your salary, I'm going to hold some of it until the end of the year. I like bonus plans that are based off these certain targets, and there's a value to those targets. It's what we're trying to accomplish this year. But it's neither here nor there, and HR people don't like to manage the complexity and all that. But nonetheless, he says these are hygiene. These are expected. So if my pay is $100,000 and my bonus potential is 25% of my pay, and I'm like, I know I won't get all 25%, but I'll probably get 20. 120,000 is my salary. That's just what I'm expecting to do my job. If I only get 105, I'm now upset and demotivated because the hygiene factor, the expected, is not there. If I get 130, but it's after the fact, and it was unexpected, it never motivated different performance. It just set a new standard for next year of my expected. It may motivate me for the short run. What he says are true motivators: personal growth opportunities, advancement opportunities, responsibility, the quality or type of work itself. And I know a lot of people who make a killing and hate the work, and they're not motivated, even though they earn the job because they are making a killing, but it's not motivating them to do better. Recognition, achievement. These are the things that actually motivate. These things are things that are expected to be willing to show up each day to do the job. What are the implications for you as a manager if you take this at face value and say this is true, and these are the motivators? What's the implication for you as a manager?
Some of it, I think, those top items, every individual is different, so what motivates a specific employee to take part of your team?
Yeah, so I need to get to know each person.
Exactly.
It's very individual. I can't just say, here's our motivation program. Doesn't work that way. Companies try, doesn't work that way. I'll tell you what it meant to me when I first saw Herzberg. I went, sweet. I can actually affect a large amount of the top list. I can't affect things like salary. So if motivation is all salary and pay, I'm toast. I can't affect a lick of that. I can, make some suggestions, and I can request, and I can go to bat for people, but I can't do a whole lot about it. It's like, hey, I got you a grand extra year. Oh, thanks. I really appreciate that. I expected the grand anyway, so, there's not really extra motivation there. I couldn't do a lot about that. But I could set people up to learn, grow, get better. I could give them, within my sphere of responsibility, some increasing responsibility. I could, now they were hired to do a job, but I could affect the environment within which the work itself is done. I could certainly control recognition. People like being a part of successful teams, so the more the team was successful, that was achievement. But I could manage more of this than I could anything down here. So to me, I found that as liberating. So you walk into a situation, the company as a manager gives you nothing and says, hey, make this team better. I felt like, oh, okay, the cards aren't stacked against me. I actually can affect making this team better because I don't need all the tools at the bottom to motivate them. All right. Well, we didn't get as far as into building your own theory of management. I will pick up there probably later this afternoon. You were on break. I gave up some time yesterday, so I took a little time this morning. Now, what would really be interesting is if I full-size this. You could just capture everything Brad writes on the small whiteboard, we could make full-size screen.
Is it still running?
Oh, yeah. Really good to capture all the great stuff on camera.
Let's put that on YouTube.
We can cut these off if I want to edit.